Channel 2, English. 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 Channel 2, English.
Bonjour tout le monde. Can you hear us? Welcome everybody in this room and of course online. Great to be with you today for the plenary session in February, number 1. Of course, as you all know, there will be a second one. And now it's up to our group president, Iratxe García Perez, and then afterwards, time for your questions. Merci.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone at this new timing, actually, this time slot that we've been given for our press meeting. I'm not sure whether it's going to be something that we will actually stick to over time or whether we'll go back to the Tuesday mornings in the future, but I'd like to thank you for having come along this afternoon to this press meeting for us to have a look at the content of the plenary session this week. As you know, we've started this morning with a debate which looked at the special EU summit and had a debate on that in the hemicycle. We feel that the result of this special EU summit was actually very positive. We felt that at the end of the summit we were able to agree on aid to Ukraine, and this was a question which was a key issue for us, as we said already in the debate in the hemicycle today. We want to support Ukraine because supporting Ukraine is also supporting the European Union, the state of law, and I think in a situation that we're in today where we have had where we've seen this war being waged for the last 2 years by Putin against Ukraine, we can see this is a clear demonstration that the European Union is very close to a people that is suffering, a people which is actually hoping to be part of the EU one day. So we need to support them financially, militarily. We need to support Ukraine to make sure that at the end of this conflict we have a victory for Ukraine. And you also know as well that Hungary at the end of the day did accept the agreement and actually unblocked the funds to support Ukraine. It was Mrs. Meloni who was able to convince, we believe, Mr. Orban. I'm not sure whether it was because there was a commitment that during the next legislative period, that Orban's group will actually be able to join or to be part of the ECR group. Perhaps that was the commitment that she made. That they'll have to decide upon that themselves. But there was actually a very strange arrangement made, a strange friendship struck up between Mrs. Meloni and Mr. Orban. Mrs. Meloni in Italy appears as the great defensor of Ukraine, and Mr. Orban has actually been blocking the aid that we agreed on to give to Ukraine. So that's an odd marriage, really. And when Mr. Meloni talked about the need for us to have a European pact on immigration, when Orban himself is the one who's actually against this immigration pact. So it's a really strange arrangement that's been reached, but it's up to them to come to terms with it. But I think it's not just them. I think that we too have got to understand that this idea, the idea that's been put forward by Manfred Weber for have a cooperation with the other groups, I think we've got to see whether Orban's going to be part of that group as well, because if they weren't actually able to be in the EPP group, now they're in a group. They might be in a group where there will be new political alliances struck. So perhaps this is one response that has come from these negotiations. Mr. Weber will have to decide. Mrs. Meloni, as you know, is going to have to decide whether or not she's going to go speak out against the situation in the prisons or jails in Hungary and the situation concerning a young Italian citizen in a prison in Hungary who is not being given her proper rights, and where we are seeing her fundamental rights of this young woman being being ignored. And so I think that it's going to be interesting to see how Mrs. Maloney deals with this Italian citizen in a Hungarian jail. And then, in addition to this question on Hungary, I think you'll all realise as well that we have a particular situation with a clear mobilisation of the agricultural sector. We've seen this throughout the European Union and many different countries of the EU and here in the institutions as well. Just last week we saw demonstrations in Brussels, and this week and today we have demonstrations here in Strasbourg. I think it's important that we actually understand that we've got to listen to what the farmers are saying, because the problems that they're facing are real. We've got to address these issues. We've got to address these problems, and we've got to make sure that we take the time to listen and see how we can actually overcome the problems that are being confronted by this sector. That we've seen over the last couple of years how inflation has hit their business. We've seen how the war in Ukraine has affected this sector in a particular way. It's a very clear manner. So I think it's important that we are able to address these from a European perspective and see what we can do to overcome these problems. This is also means that we're going to have to provide additional aid to the sector to enable them to overcome these problems. But we're not just talking about budgetary aid, financial aid. We also have to ensure that we look at other questions, such as how we can simplify the bureaucracy that they're confronted with, or also look at other issues, such as, for example, the supply chain and the value chain, so that the farmers do actually get decent, fair prices for the foodstuffs that they're producing. The food that is being put on the table here in Europe and across the world. So the farm sector is a strategic sector in Europe, and we've got to listen to the farmers today. We've got to try and work with them to resolve the problems. But I'm also going to make another comment on this question of the farm demonstrations, because this should not become this should not become a battle between the right and the far right as to who actually defends the rights of the farmers best. The future of Europe is the future of our farmers, and no one, I think, can actually say that they are more representative of that sector. The sector has its representatives, and what we've got to do today, we as political leaders and institutions have got to try and find the area for dialogue with their leaders. We've got to listen, and we've got to try and find a solution. As Mr. Manfred Weber said this morning, he just simply said that he represents the farmers. No, the representatives of the farmers are actually selected by the farmers themselves. We are here to carry out politics and not to carry out an electoral campaign for the future European elections. So that's why I believe that the sector actually deserves us to work with more responsibility, clarity and transparency on these issues, not trying to make them partisan issues as some parties are trying to do in a sector which is strategic for the entire European Union. They do not need for us to use them as a political weapon against each other. What we need to do is listen to what they're saying and try to implement their proposals and work out with proposals with them around the table. Because let me remind you that the EPP seems to be criticising measures today which are actually linked to the common agricultural policy, which I must say was actually passed by with votes from the EPP as well, and from national governments as well, which are led by the EPP. So I think that it's be difficult for them to explain those inconsistencies if they're saying today that they are the ones who defend the farmers' rights. Now let me move on to look at the rest of the agenda. As you know, we also have a debate on the state of law and in Greece. So the threat to the rule of law and media freedom in Greece, it's actually quite concerning to us, quite of concern of what is happening in Greece. We are seeing many attacks to the state of law in Greece. We're seeing we sent a letter to the President von der Leyen to actually express our concern about recent events in Greece and on the freedom of press. We're working on a resolution for the Parliament, and the EPP, of course, has unhitched its wagon from this resolution, because they seem to believe in this is defending the rule of law when it suits them, but not when it affects a government that is from their political family. I think in that case they don't necessarily see a need for the respect of fundamental rights. Greece should be actually seen as a fundamental issue in this debate on the rule of law and media freedom. And I think it's important for us to look clearly and see what is going on within the discussions on this resolution. And then I will actually take your questions, but I just wanted to inform you that this evening in the group meeting, we're going to be having a meeting and a discussion with our leader of the Democratic Party in Slane. As you know, we recently had a meeting with the Bureau of the group, with the Romanian delegation to commemorate the second anniversary of the death of our dear colleague and President David Sassoli. And we had the opportunity to meet with Nelly, and we were very pleased to be able to have that opportunity. We also underscored the importance of the European project because, of course, she's a companion from this house and has been a member of the group. So in 2 days, on the 18th of February, the Bureau of the group is going to be celebrating, or we're organising a meeting to Bucharest with the idea of establishing an agenda for our days in Bucharest, and meeting with the social organisations and other civil society organisations to put forward ideas on providing information on our work for the next couple of months of this legislative period. So I think I've covered everything, and I'm open to any questions that you might have. Thank you very much, Iratxe. I can see the floor is now open.
¿Qué tal? Laura Zornoza para EFE.
Laura Butterland, I just want to know what your group thinks about the decision of the Commission to withdraw the text on sustainable pesticides, and you talked about what the farmers are calling for. What is your proposal on that, or your feeling on that? Well, yes, what is very clear is that at the moment we have this text on pesticides. I think it's very difficult because of the material time that we have for us to actually deal with this during this legislative period. I don't think we're going to make much progress on that text, which is why I think it's been withdrawn. But we're expecting the European Commission to put us on the table with a serious proposal to look at the situation that we find ourselves in. Now, if they've withdrawn the proposal, it doesn't mean to say that there's no commitment from the Commission to actually deal with this question of pesticides. But I think that we need to actually perhaps look and see how we can reduce the number of pesticides that are in use. But if there's going to be a new proposal, I believe that we need to have a new proposal which will look at how we can reduce the number of pesticides in general, but also how we can actually support the various sectors that are going to be impacted by this, not just the farming sector, but also the environment. It's also the consumers that will be affected by this. It's also going to have health implications, etc. So if we need to put forward a proposal which is going to look at how we can reduce the use of pesticides in a very practical way, and which is actually in keeping with these environmental, social and economic standards that we have today. Thank you.
Are there further questions? I look around once again. If that's not the case, then thank you very much, Iratxe García Perez, and wish you all a good week. Merci.
Channel 2 English